I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now show. You know that thing you've been thinking about doing? Yeah, that one. Why not now? Have you ever actually taken the time to ask yourself, what's stopping me? Let's talk it through. This is your chance to give that idea the attention it deserves and take action. Each episode, I have a chat with a fascinating person, from entrepreneurs to athletes, celebrities, my parents, rocket scientists, and all walks of life. We talk through a critical time when they've asked themselves, why not now? We dissect that day or even that moment, step by step. Today on the show, we have Jim Kwik. He helps people learn how to learn. And he's helped me, actually. He is a world expert in speed reading, memory improvement, brain performance, and accelerated learning. And this is all fairly ironic because his story is incredible. Growing up, one of his school teachers referred to him as the boy with the broken brain. He had a brain injury when he was younger, and now he's become the expert on the brain. So this is an example of someone who has kind of taken their mess and made it their message. I have learned how to speed read from Jim, and millions of people have learned so many things from him, including how to increase the rate and accelerate the process of learning in general. So here's Jim. Most of you know that I'm a big Headspace fan. And if you're new to the show, just as some background, I started using the Headspace app about a year ago, and it's been the single best thing I've ever done for myself. Here's the thing though. Sometimes meditation and mindfulness is not what we imagine. Yes, there are days when I feel like I'm in a Zen situation, and other days I've been known to hit the SOS button. There's literally an SOS button on the Headspace app. So there have been times where I've removed myself from certain situations and gone somewhere to push this button. One time I even escaped my car. So this quick 3-minute mind saver has kept me from falling down that rabbit hole in some way. Or even saying things I didn't mean, maybe texting or emailing something to someone that I didn't mean. It's like taking a breath of fresh air, and it just allows me to reset. And as Jimmy Fallon, who uses the app, has even said, it's great. This British guy comes on, tells me it's going to be all right. In fact, the British guy, Andy, who's been on the podcast, comes on and says this when you hit the SOS button.
Okay, so you've hit the SOS button. So there's a pretty good chance you're feeling pretty stressed right now. So to begin with, I'd just like you to find a place where you can sit down just for 2 or 3 minutes, completely undisturbed.
So maybe you already meditate, maybe not, but you want to start. Regardless of the case, let's be real. Most of us don't have a Zen sanctuary with a fluffy pillow, mood lighting to retreat to when we're about to lose it. So now you can literally have an SOS button that you push. It's a 3-minute pause thanks to Headspace. There hasn't been a time when I've hit that button and it hasn't made me feel better. Welcome to the show, Jim. How are you doing?
I'm doing so well, Amy. Thank you for having me, and thank you everyone who's listening.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've had the opportunity to be one of your students in various phases and places while you're on stage and online, and I look forward to this conversation and definitely consider you an Olympic why notter. So here we go.
Congratulations on the show. It's magnificent.
Thank you so much. We're having a lot of fun. So what comes to mind as far as just a time when you had to ask yourself, why not now?
Wow. I think I have dozens of why not now moments that come to mind right away. And so these are things I don't normally talk about. So this will be an interesting conversation. Can I give, just before I go into my why not now moment, the one that's just I don't usually share? Can I give a little bit of backstory?
Please do. Absolutely.
Okay, so
Love
you
that.
mentioned a lot of people know me as this brain expert, and they see me on stage memorize a room full of people's names, or 100 names, or 100 numbers, or 100 words, and I do it forwards and backwards. And I always tell people I don't do this to impress you. I do this to express to you what's really possible, because the truth is everybody who's listening could do it also, regardless of your age or your background or your career, your gender, your personal history. It's just we weren't taught how to do it. And if anything, we were taught that we have limitations, like somehow our intelligence, our potential, our memory, our learning is somehow fixed like our shoe size. And we know that it's not true. And I'll relate it a little bit later to my why not now moment in terms of neuroscience. But we've discovered more about the human brain in the past 20 years than the previous 2,000 years. And what we found that it has incredible capacity. We're grossly underestimates its capabilities. And the reason why I could talk so passionately about how people have mental superpowers is because I grew up with learning challenges. A lot of people don't know that. I had a head injury when I was 5 years old, and it took me a long time to understand things. Teachers would have to repeat themselves 4 or 5 times, and then at the end I would just pretend that I understood, but I didn't really. I had very bad focus, a very bad memory. It actually took me 3 or 4 years longer just to learn how to read as a child. And it was so traumatic for me, because I'm building up to what my why not now moment is, where we would sit around. You remember, Amy, where you learn how to read, they would pass around the book and you would have to read out loud in front of your friends in class.
Sure. Absolutely.
That was very nerve-wracking for most people. And it was definitely nerve-wracking for me because I couldn't read. And I got so phobic. And what I mean phobic, a lot of people are nervous of public speaking, but I really clench up and my heart beats out of my chest and I can't even breathe. And I think that's where a lot of, fear of public speaking comes from. And anyway, I grew up with learning challenges. I remember in elementary school overhearing a teacher say to another parent that point to me, not thinking I was paying attention, saying, "That's the boy with a broken brain." And I was like, "Ooh, that's something I'm going to have to go to therapy about."
Oh, wow. Yes.
But it was really impressionable. And so when I went to junior high and went to high school, I would do the work. My parents immigrated here, and they had, like many immigrants, we had many jobs and everything. I had very good discipline. But if a teacher, I would do a book report, and if a teacher asked me in high school to give a presentation about it in front of the class, I would actually lie and say I didn't do the book report, and I would throw the book report away on the way out of class, and I would take a failing grade. And that's how traumatic, my academic, venture was.
So this followed you all the way through school.
All through school. I mean, since I was 5 years old, elementary school, middle school, junior high, high school. And when I got to college, when I was 18 years old, I wanted to start fresh. And I think everybody could relate to this idea of starting fresh and having a clean slate, right? Maybe that's part of their why not story. And I wanted to make my family proud and show the world I could do it. And I actually did worse because it was so much more difficult. And I was ready to quit school because it just wasn't for me. And a friend said, "Hey, before you tell your parents you're going to quit school, why don't you go home? I'm going to be visiting my family this weekend. Why don't you come with me and just get some perspective?" And I think when we need to make good decisions, including decisions like why not now, is getting perspective on things. A change of place, a change of people helps to give you a different point of view. Mm-hmm. And so I go to visit his home, and the family is very well off and beautiful home near the water. And the father walks me around his property before dinner and asks me a very innocent question. Something you would ask an 18-year-old boy. Says, "How's school?" And this was the worst question, Amy, anyone could ever ask me. And I just break down and I tell him my whole thing and how I had learning challenges. I couldn't read, and school is really difficult, and I struggle and I suffer privately, and I pretend everything's going okay, but it's not. And I don't know how to tell my parents that I need to quit. And he's like, "Jim," this is a powerful question. He says, "Jim, why are you in school? What do you want to be? What do you want to do? What do you want to have? What do you want to share with the world?" And another thing that I just learned, in this, is that that questions have a lot of power behind them, and asking the right questions have the right kind of power. I really do believe ask and you shall receive, and if you ask really good questions, you'll get really good answers. But most people, when it comes to learning, they're not asking the right questions. And that's why I love the title of your show, right? Why Not Now? Because it puts people's focus into something that's more empowering than something that puts them more where they lose their freedom, right? Where they lose their ability to make good decisions. And so he asked me this question, why are you in school? And I go to answer him and he says, stop. And he takes a journal out of his back pocket and he starts tearing a couple of sheets and he makes me write it down on a piece of paper. And I think that's also a really good strategy for people who want to make a good decision. Like Why Not Now is just to take notes, and not just take notes, but make notes. You find that some of the most incredible geniuses in history, they did these studies. They wanted to find out, are geniuses taking notes because they're geniuses, or is it because they're taking notes that they turn into geniuses? And I don't mean just academic geniuses. I mean, you talk about art, technology, philanthropy, any area where people are excelling. So I'm a big believer that taking notes and making notes really helps to enhance, our ability to make really good decisions and have clarity. Anyway, I make this bucket list of the things I want to be, do, have, and share. And when I'm done, Amy, I start folding the pieces of paper to put in my pocket, thinking the exercise is done. And he grabs it right out of my hands, my bucket list, my dream list, right? And I'm freaking out because I wasn't expecting him to see what I was writing down. I mean, those are my intimate personal dreams and goals in my life. And he starts reading them to himself. And I don't know how much time goes by, but after he's done, he looks at me and he says, Jim, you are this close to everything on this list. And he spreads his two index fingers apart about 12 inches. And I'm thinking, there's just no way. I mean, give me 10 lifetimes. I'm not going to crack that list. And I'm fighting for my limitations. You know how sometimes people do that when people come to me all the time, just says, Jim, I'm just a slow reader. I'm just not smart enough. I'm too old.
Like the learned helplessness.
Exactly. I'm just, my mind, I have a horrible memory. And this is what I always tell people. If you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. If you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. And I think people a lot of times when they're thinking about bigger aspirations and dreams, like including why not now, is sometimes these unconscious beliefs come up and they start fighting for why they can't have it now, or why they can't start now. I have no time. I have no this or that. And people, if you fight for it, you get to keep it. Anyway, I'm fighting for my limitations. And he's like, and he's a really smart man. He's like, and I'm telling him about all my schoolwork and why I can't read all, and learn all this stuff. And he takes me into his home, and you would love it. It's in the room that's wall to wall, ceiling to floor, covered in books. And I've never seen a library in somebody's home before. And he starts handing me these books, Amy. And now imagine books. Now I love books, but before I have a big phobia of books because I can't read very well.
Sure.
So it's like being in a room full of snakes.
Yeah.
And imagine though he just starts grabbing snakes off the shelf and starts handing them to you. And that's what he was doing. I started looking at the titles, and there were incredible biographies of men and women in history and some really early personal growth books, like The Power of Positive Thinking and Psycho-Cybernetics and The Magic of Thinking Big. And he makes me read. He asked me to read one book a week. And I'm just like, haven't you been listening to me? I have all this schoolwork and I have midterms. I can't even get through my own schoolwork. And he looks me right in the eyes and he says, Jim, don't let school get in the way of your education. And I was like, wow. And I didn't know back then it was a Mark Twain quote. Because what he ended up doing when he spread his fingers out 12 inches, when he says you're this close to everything on this list, he took those, when I said there's no way, he took those two fingers and put them on the side of my ears, like my temples, meaning it's my brain. That my brain, yeah, exactly. My brain is in the way, and it's also a bridge to be able to get what I want on that list. But he says, don't let school get in the way of your education. And I was like, it's a Mark Twain quote. I was like, that's really clever, yet still I can't do it. I can't promise I'm going to do it because if I promise it, I have to do it and I have too much work. And then very smart man, he takes out my bucket list, which he still has, and he starts reading every single one of my dreams out loud. And something about hearing a stranger who's obviously very happy, very successful, saying out loud my dreams, my fantasies out into the universe. I mean, it shook with my heart, my mind, my spirit, something fierce. And honestly, a lot of the things on that list were things I wanted to do for my family, things that they could never afford or they would never do for themselves. And with that extra leverage or motivation, I agree. I tell this man, I will go back and I will read one book a week, not knowing how to do it. But sometimes you just have to say yes and you'll figure out a way, much like why not now, right? And trust that when you leap off the cliff, right, that you'll build wings, or
Yeah,
you'll learn how to fly.
one of my favorite why not now formula kind of ingredients is to not give yourself an out. And like Tony Robbins said on the show, if you want to take the island, you burn your boats. And that is exactly what it sounds like you were doing, is that you said yes and knew that you'd go figure out a way, but first you just had to tell them yes.
Exactly. And so I think all of those things matter. And so I say yes. Now fast forward, I'm at school, I'm sitting at my desk and I have a pile of books that I have to read for school, and then a pile of books that I want to read that I promised this man I would do. And it's kind of interesting also, just the fact that I committed, it had to do with my personal motivation. And I think another kind of element that gets me to take action and act on it now is having that motivation, that motive for taking action. Because so many people disassociate or they distract themselves from the thing that's most important to them. And so understanding how to get leverage behind yourself and incentivize yourself is really important. So my leverage was my family. So now I'm back at school and I promised to read all these books, and I have all my schoolwork and I can't keep up. So I don't eat, I don't sleep, I don't work out, I don't spend time with friends, and I live in the library. And then one night I end up passing out late at night. I fall down a flight of stairs, I hit my head again, and I wake up in the hospital 2 days later. And at this point, I'm dying. I really thought I died. I was down 117 pounds to 117 pounds. I was hooked up to these IVs. I was malnourished, dehydrated. And when I woke up, I was so depressed. I thought there had to be a better way. And I said that. I was like, there has to be a better way. And when I had that thought, a nurse came and brought me a mug of tea with a picture of somebody the opposite of what I felt. It was Albert Einstein, true genius. And the quote on there changed my life. It said this: "The same level of thinking that's created your problem won't solve your problem. The same level of thinking that's created your problem won't solve your problem." And it made me ask a new question. It made me ask, and which questions we talked about are the answers. So it made me think, like, what's my problem? It was like, my problem is I have a very slow brain. And I was like, well, how do I think differently about it? Well, maybe I could learn to have a quicker brain. Maybe I could learn how to learn. And I picked up my course bulletin and I looked at all the courses that were offering at school, and all the classes were good classes, were what to learn: math, history, science, Spanish. But there were 0 classes on how to learn, how to listen, how to think for yourself, how to be creative, how to focus, concentrate, how to read faster, how to remember more. I always thought that it should have been the 4th R in school: reading, writing, arithmetic. But what about remembering? What about retention? What about recall? And Socrates says there is no learning without, remembering. And that put me on a quest for the next couple of months to solve this riddle. I wanted, and this way, I made a big leap into this because I wasn't going to wait. I wanted to do it now, and made me solve this riddle of my brain. I want to understand how my brain works so I could work my brain, how my memory works so I could work my memory. And I started studying everything I can on positive psychology and brain science and adult learning theory and reading mechanics and memory. And 60 days into it, a light switch went on. And this is where my why not now moment comes up. I started to understand things. For the very first time in my life, I started to understand things. I started to have better focus. I started to remember things. I started to be able to apply things. I started to read faster, and not like read a page in a book and get to the end and just forget what you just read, how a lot of people do it, but I actually started to understand it to the point where I could almost teach it. And when I was done, after 60 days, a light switch went on, and everything got better. My grades, my relationships, my friendships, my health, everything got better. Now, when I started to get those kind of results, this is my challenge, my why not now moment, is because I just had a big awakening and like a big transformation. And my biggest thing is I had all this angst in my body, and actually anger, to be more accurate, thinking, why wasn't this stuff taught in school? Do you know what I mean? It's like I suffered for the better part of a decade and a half because I didn't know how to learn, and nobody taught me how to learn. And why do people struggle and make it difficult for themselves? Why isn't this taught? And then so my thing was, I was struggling with this why not now moment was, well, why why isn't this being taught, and why shouldn't I teach it, and why shouldn't I start teaching it now? And you can imagine like being 18 years old and just being sedated your whole life, right? You're limited in all these different areas because you have this brain injury. And all of a sudden you just proved after 60 days of just learning new things, stuff like meta learning, accelerated learning, that you can make a big mark. And then should you just keep it to yourself, or can you teach it to other people? And I never talked about this publicly before, but what I ended up doing to be safe was I said, okay, I saw this room that wasn't being used on a Thursday night. I said, okay, next Thursday at the same time, I'm going to put 5 or 10 people in that room and test this. Put 5 or 10 people in that room and teach them for a couple hours what's working for me. And then maybe 1 or 2 of them wants to be tutored so I could, pay this forward. And also, I didn't have a lot of money growing up at all. And so maybe I could eat also because I was very malnourished, 117 pounds, and all my friends are ordering, pizza and broccoli and Chinese food and just everything, right? And so, so I go home and to my dorm room, I take out a piece of paper, Amy, and I write this. This is my first ever marketing. I write free speed reading memory seminar, get better grades in less time. And I put Thursday, 7:00 in the room number, right? And the next morning, I just make some photocopies on the way to class. And I just put them up on some bulletin boards, not expecting a whole lot. And then fast forward to Thursday, 7:00, and I was like, I start running over to the classroom, and I'm turning the corner, hoping only 1, 2, 3, maybe 5 people show up. And when I turn the corner, Amy, there's a crowd of people outside that classroom.
Wow.
I mean, a crowd of people. And I'm thinking, honestly, I hope whatever's going on ends soon so I could do my thing. That's what I was thinking at that time. And I was just like, whatever's, happening, I hope it ends soon. And I started approaching the doorway, and I can't even get inside the door because there's this, big guy in the doorway, and I tap him on the shoulder. I'm like, what's going on inside? And he looks down at me. He's like, there's a speed reading class. And I swear to you, I was like, wow, what a coincidence.
Didn't believe it.
What are the odds the same night at the same time in the same room there's another speed reading class? And I push my way through the door, and it's a crowd of people in the room, and there's like all the chairs are filled, standing room only in the back. And I notice nobody's teaching. And it took me, this slow brain, all this time to figure out why they were there. Yeah, they were there because of me, right? And I do a head count. Instead of 5 people or 10 people, there are 110 people in that room. And now keep in mind, I'm 18 years old. I'm wearing T-shirts and shorts. I have nothing prepared to talk about. And if you remember my story, I'm phobic of public speaking.
Yep, absolutely.
Phobic, not even like scared. I'm phobic. Like if you I spent some time in the Amazon rainforest, and we hiked and came across an indigenous tribe. They'd never seen Westerners before. Ended up having dinner with them the second night, playing with our kids the third night, doing these amazing things. I swear I was perspiring more in that classroom than I did the entire trip in the Amazon. It was like that freaky for me. And so I'm panicking. I can't breathe. So I leave because I can't do it. Right. It's just honest. And I go to, there's these fountains there outside on the campus, and I go to the fountains and I just close my eyes and I meditate. And because I can't even go back to the dorm room because I don't want my friends to make fun of me, right? And I just meditate. And I think meditation, mindfulness is so very, very important in order to make a good decision. Seriously, why not now? Do it from a clear space. And so I'm just meditating, and I'm in this zone. And now I'm doing this walking meditation back to my dorm room, and I hear my mother's voice inside my head. And when you're just in that zone and things come to you, right? And my mom, I won't tell you what she says, but she essentially says, all these people came out, 100 people came out because you promised them something, and now you're not delivering on it, and you're disappointing them, and you're disappointing me. And I'm like, whoa. And I'm doing this walking meditation back to my dorm room, and I stop and I take one step back to the classroom. Let me say it again. I'm doing this walking meditation back to my dorm room. I stop when I hear my mom's voice say that I'm disappointing her, and I take one step back to the classroom. And it's so funny, Amy, that one step in another direction completely changes your destination. One step in another direction completely changes your destination, or what they call your destiny. And that was a big moment for me. I mean, that really was a why not now moment, because I ended up going back to that classroom. There was 100 people there. I apologized and I just talked for 2 hours. And I honestly don't remember what I said, being a world memory coach. I don't remember what I said, but at the end I do. I said, I don't know if you found any of this useful, but if I could help you, I would love to do so. It takes about, 10 hours of me teaching you what's working for me to help you get better grades in less time. If you're interested, I get $30 an hour, because that's what I used to get teaching tennis back when I was growing up, and need about 10 hours with you. I'll be in the student center tomorrow at noon to answer any of your questions. And then when I'm done like that, saying that, Amy, like the whole room just gets up and they leave in like a trance. And I'm so confused because did I just mess up? Was that a total waste of time for them and for me? And I feel that confusion. And I also feel complete exhaustion. So exhausted, I ended up falling asleep right because I was mentally, emotionally, physically spent. I fall asleep right on the floor on the carpet there. It was the deepest sleep I've ever had in my life. I get woken up actually the next morning by the class coming in the next morning, the next day. And I freak out and I run back to my dorm room. I shower, I have breakfast, I go to class. 12 o'clock comes and I remember, I promised that would be in the student center at 12 if anyone was interested. I go to the student center. I hope just one person didn't think I was a complete not smart person. And when I get there, a crowd of familiar faces they're waiting for me. And at the end of an hour or two, 71 of the 100 students ended up signing up for a course on accelerated learning and speed reading and memory and study skills that didn't even exist.
Oh my goodness.
And I just, it's so crazy because I didn't even do the math at $30
times 30
an hour.
times 10.
It's $300 times 71.
Yeah.
So now I'm not even 19 years old and I have $21,000 cash in my backpack. And I go back and I think about what my mentor said. And my mentor said, don't let school get in the way of your education. And so I take the money and I use part of it to feed my body because I was very underweight, but I use the rest of it thinking about not letting school get in the way of my education. I use it to feed my mind. And I study everything I could get my hands on in terms of my field, speed reading and memory and focus and concentration. And my message to everybody is basically that they have genius inside of them. And our school system didn't show us how to be able to unlock it for the world that we live in today. And that's been my mission ever since. And I could tell you the best closing part of this is one of the students, she read 30 books in 30 days. She was a freshman, 30 books in 30 days. Who does that? Imagine going to Amazon, picking up 30 books and reading and retaining 30 books. I wanted to find out not how she did it, but why she did it. And I found out that her mother was dying of terminal cancer, was given 60 days to live by doctors. And I wished her luck. And the books she was reading were books to try to save her mom's life. 6 months later, I get a call from this young lady, and she's crying, and she's crying, and she's crying. And I find out they're tears of joy. And I find out that her mother not only survived, but is really getting better. Doctors don't know how, they don't know why, they call it a miracle. But her mother attributes it 100% to the advice she got from her daughter, who learned them for all these books. That's where I realized that if knowledge is power, learning is your superpower. That if knowledge is power, learning is your superpower, and it's your birthright.
Whoa. Oh, wow. So first of all, Jim, I have to give you an award for being the most articulate and best Why Not Now story, as far as you walked us through and described exactly what happened, and it's so vivid. So thank you so much for not only your storytelling abilities, but for being vulnerable and talking through, the second half of that, because you've shared some of these tidbits before in the beginning, but I had no idea about the moment that you decided to go and try and apply this in the one small room, and then it turned into a huge attendance. So thank you for that so much. Some of the things that I'm just thinking through, the takeaways, even back to when your friend's father asked you the question, why are you in school? And that power of question. Right now, I'm actually reading Ask More, The Power of Question by Frank Sesno. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but that's an interesting take, because the why not now question is obviously, there is a question mark there, but a lot of people don't really think to answer the question.
Right.
The literal, no, write down on a piece of paper, why not? Why not do that right now? And I think the process and going through that helps us arrive at, really, there's nothing that's logical that's in my way. I'm making a lot of this up or for whatever reason. But also just how you kind of took your mess and you made it your message. I've heard Robin Roberts say that before, but it seems like, you really unlocked your own superpower when you embraced, this quote unquote problem that you had. So it's kind of amazing. So fast forward, and I just love your focus on reading and your ability to help people not only accelerate the rate of their reading, but realize the power in reading and knowledge. And when you're working with people and you are kind of helping them unlock their superpowers, if you will, what are some of the first things that you ask them as far as questions?
Well, that's a great question, and I could appreciate all your questions also. That's why I enjoy your podcast, and I enjoy dialogue, because I think questions get people to think. And even when I've never really articulated the way that I did, it was kind of a stream of consciousness. So you hold some amazing space, Amy, for that to come out.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing.
Because
I was captivated.
I'm thinking about the elements in terms of why not now, in terms of presence. But you're right, questions were a major ingredient, meaning the questions he was asking, like what do you want to be, do, have, share, or any kind of questions directs our focus. And so questions is a big part of my methodology, especially when it comes to reading or working with clients. The writing down part was kind of interesting also, because he made me write it down. And I find that when people need to make a decision, sometimes it comes from different parts of their body, but I think it helps to get clarity by writing things down for people. I think that's another tool. So anyone who's thinking about that why not moment, now moment. The other thing I just want to articulate, a lot of the questions that I ask help to figure out people's motivation. And so questions I would ask, to answer your question with another question, is questions I would ask working with clients is, I want to know what's most important to them. And like what's most important to them in life, what's most important to them in their career, what's most important to them in learning. Because from there, I get their motivation. And I feel like there's a success formula. I call it H cubed, that it goes from your head to your heart to your hands. That if you visualize things in your head, like especially something that you're thinking about doing, it could be a why not moment. It could be something you're visualizing or you're thinking about or you're affirming it. But if you're not acting with your hands, like now, then I find the second H is usually missing, which is the heart, the emotion, the energy of motion. And I think that's why it's very important. And so on your podcast, people like Simon Sinek, right? Start with why, who's a mutual friend of ours. Like you have to tap into that. And even when it comes to learning, finding out people's motivation is very important, because when it comes to long-term memory, this is the thing. Information combined with emotion becomes a long-term memory. Information combined with emotion becomes a long-term memory. And so most people, when they're learning in school, the emotion is zero. They're bored. So 0 times anything is 0. And that's why a lot of long-term application doesn't actually happen for people. But if people don't actually act on something, they're not usually motivated in the moment, like this young lady was, who read 30 books in 30 days. She was highly motivated. I did a talk recently in Silicon Valley, and afterwards, Bill Gates comes up to me, and we start having this incredible conversation about, first of all, I asked him if he could have any one superpower, what would it be? And he says, Jim, the ability to read faster. And I was like, I totally help you with that. But just going on what you mentioned about reading, leaders are readers. But the other thing we're having is a conversation about the future of education. And I was taking more of an accelerated learning theory approach. He was taking, obviously, from a technology approach. And someone who was listening was saying, well, is there anything else missing? And we were chatting, and we decided the same thing, motivation. understanding human motivation, because I feel like we all know what we need to do, but we can't get ourselves to do it now. And so I think emotion is very important. I remember, and this is going to answer your other question. I recently got invited to Sylvester Stallone's home, and because there was a big boxing match there, and he was like, "Do you want to go watch the big boxing match of the year at my home?" And I'm like, "Yes, I totally want to watch a boxing match with Rocky." And I
yes.
and I'm not super. I love competition because I feel like competition, metaphorically, sports is a good metaphor for life. But I don't like people get hit in the head, so I'm a little bit conflicted with it. Anyway, I get there, I sit on the couch. Sly Stallone sits right next to me, and next to him is Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I swear, if you took a picture of this couch, you would be like, who photoshopped that Asian dude in that photo? But afterwards, going back to Why Not Now, is this. I was like, what does it take to be a champion, guys? Those champions they're the best in the world. What does it take? And I'll always remember what Arnold said to me. He said, Jim, the difference between an amateur and a champion is able to push past the pain period. And it's so interesting because for us to reach a big, audacious goal, right, a moonshot goal, like a lot of your guests that are on this podcast, they reach immense levels of success. There's obstacles and there's struggles and there's adversaries and there's difficulties. But those who really get through them are the ones that embrace their grit, right? And they persevere through it and they get through it. And I think what gets you through that is your motivation. And that's why I think asking the right questions, finding out what's most important to somebody when I'm working with a client helps to give them enduring goals and alluring goals instead of just SMART goals, right? Specific, measurable, and that kind of thing. I don't, that's very left brain. But for me, I create heart goals. H is like it's healthy for all parts of my life. And E is it's enduring. It'll get me through the hard times. A is alluring because it pulls me through. It's so attractive. It's a bright light and it gives me lots of hope and it pulls me. The R is relevant because I find a lot of people's goals aren't relevant to their problems or to their values that's most important to them. And then the T in heart for reaching your goals and overcoming procrastination or setting and getting goals is T is truth. Is it your truth? So many people set goals for, why not now, but they set these impotent goals that they're not their goals. It's somebody else's truth. It's the goals set unconsciously by their parents or by the Joneses that live in their neighborhood or their coworkers or their team, but it's not theirs. And so, listening to myself talk to you about this, questions, writing them down, figuring out people's motivation, saying yes to something. Like I said, okay, I'll read a book a week. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but you say yes, like you say, and you'll figure out a way. And then taking the first step. Because so many people, there's this thing with Why Not Now, people want to change their habits. If, let's say, they don't floss and they really know flossing is good for them and they want to add longevity and it makes them live longer and all this stuff, then what I tell people is just floss one tooth. Just floss one tooth. You don't have to floss all of them, just floss one. And guess how many people just floss one and stop?
Not very many.
Nobody. Just like with reading. I tell people just read one word. They're like, oh, I can't read all the time, and practice reading. Okay, do me a favor, open the book and just read one word. Because these are what they call tiny habits, and you could start building momentum off of that.
You mentioned the head, heart, hands, and in listening to a lot of your videos and just doing research, I've heard you say you call goosebumps truth bumps, and there's been a strong focus among the people that I've spoken with who talk about intuition, and not only that, but physiologically what happens when a certain idea comes their way or when they're trying to make a decision, like paying attention to how they physiologically feel, like there's a change in some sort. And so a lot of this really just ties in onto that too. And the speed reading, definitely everyone listening, please go check out Jim's podcast. And I will make sure to link to it, but he's the host, of course, of Kwik Brain. And they're quick, snackable podcasts and 10 minutes and you'll learn how to speed read. and I've taken this and it's amazing, and I'm going to actually do it again. But so we do focus a lot on reading, and we have the Shelfie Club on the show. So Shelfie as in take a photo of your books on your shelf, and maybe instead of so many selfies. We're trying to up the game in the online social media content. So is there something that you've been thinking about doing, Jim, that you are now tackling and it's time to get your Why Not Now on?
There is. And this is a great time to have this conversation, Amy. It's for the past few years, behind the scenes, I've struggled with a health ailment. And it's as accurate as I can describe it. It's like a form of sleep apnea where at night I stop breathing. And this is a little vulnerable to talk about, but I stop breathing over like 200 times a night. And each episode is about 10 seconds long. So I wake up suffocating. And I have an oxygen, CPAP breathing device and a dental device and all these sleep aids that help me get oxygen. None of them really work. And so for the past 4 years or more, I was sleeping a total of 90 minutes a night, if you can imagine that. And so that really forces me to really dig down into my practice and self-care because I wasn't getting the oxygen. My brain wasn't getting the oxygen. I would wake up so many times, just not be able to breathe. And so a little over a year ago, it got really bad where I was being hospitalized because of lack of sleep. And it's not because my mind is wandering or it's very peaceful, actually, because I meditate, but I just can't get the oxygen in because of my genetics. And so when I'm on my, where I feel like it's my deathbed, like I almost died, like near-death experience makes me think of legacy. And so for the past 25 years, any opportunity to scale my work, I've always said no. 25 years. Infomercials, PBS specials, Train the Trainer, open quick learning franchises. You name it. Media appearances, always say no. Book deals, always said no. Every opportunity because I'm very introverted. I don't necessarily enjoy the attention or want, I don't want to be the Tony Robbins of accelerated learning in the mind and speed reading and memory because I'm inherently more shy and introverted, Yet the problem is I want to make a difference. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I have a push-pull. Like, I don't want to be famous, but I want to help so many people because my big drive is I don't want people to suffer because they don't have to suffer because they're just not taught how to learn. And so when I almost died about a year ago, I kind of woke up and a different part of me woke up also. And now I feel a moral obligation to do something, to leave something behind. And so the two things that I want to leave behind, you mentioned one of them is the podcast. This show just comes out a couple times a week. And in 10, 15 minutes, I give them one brain bite to help improve their memory, their focus, their productivity, their reading speed, anything that just helps busy people get more done in less time. The other thing that I'm thinking about right now is a book. In 25 years, I've had many opportunities to be able to do a book. And for me, it feels a little bit like it would be ironic if I've taught more people how to read than practically any teacher because mm-hmm. we have students in over 150 countries online with our speed reading programs. And I would just think I need a book. And that's where I want to pull the trigger because when is now the best time to put a book out? So the podcast is kind of like little sections of what I want to put into a book.
This is amazing to hear. I really wondered if maybe this was coming because it's pretty amazing for someone of your niche talent to have not written a book or in terms of scaling, it's usually, I would say that probably would have happened with most people year 5, or they'd be probably wanting to do it after year 2, right? And this
sure.
Suppressing it it's really a big part of your story. And, but I think, are you now realizing it's not about you as much as it is you channeling this message and knowledge to help other people? And
it does. It does, because my two biggest fears growing up, not only my fears, but my challenges were learning and public speaking. Those are my two biggest challenges by far. And the universe has a sense of humor because that's what I do for a living. I public speak about learning now. So Sylvester Stallone at the end of like on this topic about why now, why not now? He said, I asked him this very question about, doing the book or not doing it. And this was his answer, where Arnold said that, the difference between a champion and amateur is pushing the ability to push through a pain period. Sly actually asked me, he's like, Jim, when you're thinking about the book, he's like, will the pleasure be worth the pain? Will the pleasure be worth the pain? And I'm like, absolutely. Because there's the amount of pleasure I would get. I mean, the pain would be me going out there and, doing the work for the book, which I want to do anyway, but also being public about it and being uncomfortable and being on TV and sharing it. That's not a comfortable place, but it'd be worth it for just hearing. I mean, why I do what I do is for that very, my first student, saving her mom's life of cancer after she was able to read all those books after going through her course. I mean, that's a life changer for me. So I'm on a mission. I'll be doing this forever.
Well, that's great to hear. And thank you for sharing that. And also just with the health challenges, since we're friends on Facebook, I had seen a little bit of this, but we haven't discussed it. And it's amazing what perspective, those turns in our life obviously can bring. And here you are doing something so positive, from this experience, but also very scary and making yourself even more vulnerable. So it's very admirable. And I truly look forward to what's to come for you and am enjoying your podcast. Thank you so much for making it 10 minutes. I'm trying to bring mine down in terms of it's tough. It's not easy to do, but really quick rapid fire question round. I did ask, well, let's go ahead and add this one in there. So how do you keep your mind healthy? And I know you mentioned meditation and mindfulness, but feel free to add or expand or whatever.
And the things I'll say is very common sense, but it's also not common practice. So I'll give you 10 really fast things. And then I would ask people who are listening, maybe acknowledge that they are important, but then also acknowledge themselves for the areas where they can improve. For me, to keep my brain and my mind healthy, good diet, no specific order, good diet, because you are what you eat, and there's certain good foods, especially for the brain. Number 2 is getting rid of negative thoughts, because every time you say negative thought, it's just a program that your supercomputer is going to run. I always tell people your mind is always eavesdropping on your self-talk. So you definitely want to keep it positive. The third thing is exercise. People are more physically active will always just have better mental acuity, mental focus, a better memory. Anything that's good for your heart is good for your head. I would say number 4 is brain nutrients, that if you have a fast food lifestyle, you should really supplement, especially in the B vitamins, omega-3s and stuff that's good for your brain. Number 5, and this is a big one, is a positive peer group. Positive peer group is because we are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. It's not just your neurological networks or biological networks, it's your social networks. And are you spending time with people that inspire you and motivate you and challenge you and uplift you and educate you? Number 6 is a clean environment. That's kind of obvious, but when you clean your environment, you clean your laptop, you clean your desk, you feel mentally, your mind just feels sharper. Number 7 is sleep. This is a huge one. I can't overstate this enough. You need sleep. That's where you consolidate short to long-term memory. When you don't sleep, you don't make good decisions. You don't have motivation. You can't focus. Number 8 is a big one, is brain protection. Living proof of that. Your brain is resilient, but it's also fragile. So wear a helmet and avoid accidents and extreme sports. Number 9 is new learnings. And I'd be preaching to the choir because you're listening to this right now. You love to learn. It actually, but people don't know, is actually people who dedicate themselves to lifelong learning will live longer. It was on the cover of Time magazine. They had these super nuns living 80, 90 above. Half it had to do with their gratitude and their faith, but the other half is they were lifelong learners. So it added years to their life and life to their years. And finally, number 10, big one, stress management. We are under so much digital stress, digital distractions, digital demands in today's 21st century, but we grew up with a 20th century education that didn't prepare us. So that gap, the amount of information that's doubling every couple of years with how we learn it, how we read it, how we remember it, how we absorb it, it's the same. That gap creates stress. So what are you doing to manage that stress for yourself? And one of the things, obviously, that I love is meditation. I do it twice a day, because I think in order for me, if I slow down, it allows me to speed up, because my martial arts teacher taught me this years ago, that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So I would say, look at those 10 things and, don't be overly critical, but you're like, I do some of them, but, I'm not getting enough sleep, or I'm not managing my stress, or this one person in my life's really bringing me down, or I haven't really moved very much lately, or maybe I could really, get by with, fixing my diet or whatever it is. And you fix, because everyone wants to know the one thing. There's never just one thing.
Mm-hmm.
I would say determine what's most important and focus on those.
Great list there. And what's your all-time favorite book, and what are you reading right now?
Wow. All-time favorite book.
I thought this one might be tough for you.
Yeah. Well, I read for 4.5 years, I read a book a day because I was so inspired by this young lady. It just blew my mind.
For 4.5 years, you read a book a day.
It's a lot of books. I mean, that's why I train. One of our podcast episodes was how to read a book a week without speed reading.
I listened to that one. I did.
Because everyone could do it. It's just it's not undoable. Okay, so goodness, favorite book is like favorite child, because I have my library is thousands. I happen to have a bump in with Neil Gaiman, and I'm a big Sandman fan, so I'm going to go fiction on this, and I'm going to say Sandman, which is more fiction novel, as one of the all-time. What I'm reading right now is a number of books, because I get sent them just like you do. I just got a copy of Unshakable. I'm a little bit late to the party, but I'm sure
Yep.
I'm going to read it. Yeah, I mean, just what's on my shelf is I have Elon Musk on my shelf. I have Presents from Amy Cuddy. I get a lot of books from people that I know, just like you do, where you're reviewing them and stuff like that. I've never met a book I haven't liked.
I love that. And we talked a little bit about sleep, and I know, and also your health, and it sounds like there are a lot of things that physically keep you up at night. And I'm hopeful that is on a pathway, into a good place for you health-wise. Is there anything that just keeps you up at night because it's on your mind other than that?
No, for me, it was never a mental thing. I have, because of my meditation practice, and apps like Headspace and so on, I don't, it's not, my sleep is more of an obstructive, they call it obstructive apnea. So it's just because I can't breathe. I had surgery recently, a few months ago, so I'm recovering now and going to do another test to see how it is afterwards. But I would love to go from, 90 minutes or 2 hours to 4 hours. It's not perfect, but it's progress. It's more, I stated more because I don't want anyone's sympathy. I state it in that one of the lessons I've learned from this, Amy, is when you have a limited amount of energy or vitality, where you can look at a screen or be on a call or do a meeting or speak someplace or whatever, I find that you become very protective of your commitments. And I find that when I was talking about stress management and, why not now, part of what keeps people from achieving their now is all the other stuff that they're committing to. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So people are they're saying yes to goods, so they can't say yes to their now, to their great. And so for me, one of the blessings that have come out of my challenges the past 4 years with sleep is I only commit to the things that are of most important. So everything for me is heaven yes or heaven no. Like if I'm talking to you, Amy Jo Martin, because I'm excited to be talking to you, and I don't want to be anywhere else talking to anybody else. So things that don't juice me like that, I just say no. And that's my filter with everything, and I think that many people, they don't have to have just, 1 or 2 hours of sleep to get to that point. Learn from, my experience here and say no much more often. I mean, I have a to-do list, but my not to-do list is 10 times larger than my to-do list.
Wow. So powerful, that just one statement. And it sounds like, the prioritization and deciding what you really want to do is right in line with, I just read Essentialism and I'm rereading it. And I have this obsession about it. I really do. And just kind of eliminating. And yeah, that's a big one for sure. So pirates or ninjas, who's tougher?
I grew up with martial arts my whole life, so I'm gonna vote for ninjas myself. But ninja pirates would be interesting.
But any logic there for ninjas?
For ninjas, no. I mean, I'm more of a samurai person.
Okay.
Because it's so funny because in the marketing world, they're always talking about ninja stealth tactics, and that's never my motive. I always thought that, a samurai is not trying to be stealthy. They're right up front. They have honor. They're protecting, and that's more my metaphor. But I've done a decent amount of Japanese sword fighting, so that's more my little 9-year-old self.
That's for another podcast, a different day. That's awesome. That could be fun. And final question, Jim, what advice would you give to your younger self? And you can choose which age that might be.
Oh, that's simple. I mean, I could think of any age from the age of 5 when I had the brain injury up to 18 because I knew exactly what I was facing at that time. My advice for people, you know this part, Amy. I grew up in Westchester, New York, and I couldn't read. I taught myself how to read by reading comic books, and my favorite comic books were the X-Men, not because they were strongest, but just because they didn't fit in. They were mutants, and I didn't fit in school. But the coolest part was when I was reading one night that the X-Men school for the gifted was in Westchester, New York, where I lived. So people don't know this. When I was 9 years old, I used to ride my bicycle all around town in Westchester trying to find this school because I wanted to run away. I wanted to go to that school and find my superpowers and find my super friends because I didn't have that in the school that I was with. And so my advice to this child would be that you're enough. It would be that you're enough. And I think that as a child, I was looking for something that was ready inside of me. And my message to people, even though I ended up building the school online because I can never find the school, if you will. So I built the school for the gifted online with my speed reading, memory, thinking, all these programs with the podcast especially. But my advice for people is that you are enough. And my mission for helping everybody is to help them transcend, like end the trance. End the trance that you're not good enough. End the trance that you're not smart enough. End the trance that somehow you have all these limits that you don't know where they came from. And that we're taught by marketing that all the marketing is around people's problems and their fears and everything, or it's religion, or it's their family, or all these issues. But my mission to help people transcend and really unleash what I call the superhero you, YOU, that you are the superhero that you've been looking for this whole entire time. That you don't have to wait for Superman, you don't have to wait for Superwoman, you don't have to wait for Superchild. It's you. And when is now the best time to unleash it?
Wow. This entire conversation has been full of just gold. And I feel so lucky to be able to do this, to have conversations like this and learn and listen. And I can't thank you enough, Jim. This is wonderful. And I hope to have you back on sometime.
I would love to do that. And I hope everybody finds me and says hi. And I want to know everyone's favorite book too. I want to know everyone's answers to this. So tag me at Jim Kwik, KWIK, in all your posts, because I want to see these books everyone's reading. And I want to know all the answers to all these questions. These are not easy questions.
Well, you can join the Shelfie Club too. And absolutely, you can find Jim on social, and he's everywhere, as well as his website. And again, it's JIMKWIK is how you spell his name. And I'll make sure I link.
Yeah, that's my real last name. And then the podcast in iTunes is just KWIK Brain, or you could go to kwikbrain.com. But this is so much fun. We definitely have to do this again.
Sounds good. We'll do it. And thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
I'm always so grateful for guests to share things with me that they haven't shared before, and honored to have them feel comfortable doing that. It's really special when someone feels that they are able to share a vulnerable story and to share it with you. So I think we are creating this space where it's just okay. It's acceptable. It's encouraged, and it's looked at as a kind of fundamental for helping one another, just to be able to be vulnerable. And we'll see more and more of that, I think. So as far as books go, let's talk books. So Essentialism, I am listening to it for the second time right now, and I'm also flipping through my hard copy and taking notes because I want to be thorough when I go through this with you and give you my review. First of all, I can tell you hands down, it's one of the best books and most functional books I've read in several years. And so we'll dive into that even more, I promise, next week. Also, I just started the book called Ask More, The Power of Questions by Frank Cessno. And this is actually in part for me to be able to become a better interviewer. But what I found is that this book is actually, it's much bigger and it transcends journalism or interviewing. The ability to ask questions strategically or from a point of empathy, or just be more mindful of the questions you're asking, or ability to ask more, is a pretty powerful tool. I'm seeing this surface with conversations I'm having with guests. So far so good on this one, but I have to say I'm still a big advocate and highly recommend Essentialism. So check that one out, and we'll talk more books next week. I want to hear what your Why Not Now is. Please share it with me on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook at Amy Jo Martin. I'll send a signed copy of my New York Times best-selling book, Renegades Write the Rules, to the first 200 people who listen, rate, and leave an honest review of the podcast in iTunes. And you'll also get a free month subscription from our friends at Headspace. This is only available to Why Not Now listeners. Once you've left a rating and review on iTunes, just email your iTunes handle name and your mailing address to whynotnow@amyjomartin.com, and we'll get your package in the mail to you. For detailed show notes, head to amyjomartin.com/whynotnow. That's where you'll find links to things we discussed on the show, special offers, and how you can keep in touch with guests. Hat tip to my buddies Ash and Devin at Rock Salt Music for our tunes today. You just listened to the talented John Coggins in Let's Go and Let It Ride. And a jump high five to my talented husband, Richard Greer, for producing the show and being patient with me. See you next time. Until then, why not now?